Hey everybody, and welcome to my 7th how-to video for 2022. I had a poll on my community page and asked you guys what how-to video you wanted to see next. And you can go check it out. The winner was how to design strong controls. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm Kudzai Chaka, and I will be taking you through how to design strong controls. And I hope that at the end of this video, you're going to have a lot clearer idea of how to go about doing just that. Controls are very important in terms of minimizing and mitigating the risks that a business faces. We need to make sure that we are implementing a strong control environment at all times to really manage that risk and make sure that we are not faced with non-compliance on a daily basis. And that is why it's important not only to just randomly throw controls into place, but make sure that they make sense and that they are strong controls and effective in the risk management process. Before you jump into the conversation and listen to everything I have to share with you around designing a strong control environment, I need to make a very important point. And that is that controls are not something that we as compliance officers sit at our desks and design and send out emails and say to the business, this is what you're going to be doing going forward. You need to engage the business because they are the people that actually implement the controls on the ground. So it's very important for you to first understand what is the existing process, what are the existing controls in place, and then engage them to make sure that whatever it is you're considering implementing to strengthen the controls, or if it's a new requirement and you're implementing controls to make sure there's compliance to that requirement, actually makes sense with respect to the processes that are existing, or do new processes have to be put in place to comply and implement that control, and that you are not creating new problems as you seek to solve this existing problem. So very critical to engage the business and make sure that they have the capacities. Where is this going to sit? Do they have the appropriate resources, skill set to implement the controls that you're suggesting be implemented? And in that instance, you are very much more likely to have a successful control environment rollout for your requirements, as opposed to making decisions in isolation from a lofty height somewhere in a glass office. So be sure to engage your business in this process of determining what the appropriate controls are for the risk that you are trying to manage. With that being said, let's talk about control types. There are 3 types of controls that I want to highlight today, and that is preventative controls, detective controls, and reactive controls. When you're talking about preventative controls, as the name suggests, we are talking about controls that are put in place to prevent an error or a non-compliance event from happening in the first place. In the context of compliance, think about it such as compliance training, for example, is a good control because you are educating people on what the requirements are, what the policy position of the business are in terms of having their expectations. Let's talk about anti-bribery and corruption, for example. People need to be clear within a business about the regulatory requirements around bribery, corruption, and that sort of thing, as well as the firm's policy position on things such as accepting gifts and entertainment from suppliers and different third parties and potential implications of that, what they can do in terms of getting approval on a case-by-case basis. All of those type of things prevent people from operating in the absence of knowledge or negligently and doing things that could be perceived as or could actually be bribery and engaging in corrupt activities. So training, policies, all of those are good ways to prevent an event, a risk event from occurring. The next type of control is a detective control. Again, as the name suggests, these type of controls are how you detect that something has actually gone wrong, or that there is a weakness and we are seeing things going wrong and that need to be better managed. Compliance monitoring, where we have key risk indicators, is a good way to do this and monitor things on an ongoing basis, and see if they're trending upwards, trending downwards. Does this mean that there's an issue that we need to be addressing? Look at customer complaints as an example. If you're monitoring customer complaints on an ongoing basis, it's a good indicator of whether the products and services that we are offering those clients are potentially causing harm to clients, which is something that from a regulatory perspective, we need to always be operating in the best interests of the client. So compliance monitoring is a good way to detect if any issues are arising. Compliance testing, excellent way. You go to detect any issues, you go into a particular area, get a sample, do some analysis, observe a process, and you're able to detect if something is going wrong or being missed, or things need to be addressed and more controls need to be implemented, or controls are not being executed correctly. That is a great way to be able to detect things that are not going as they should be going. So those are detective controls. And then reactive controls. This is more about something bad has happened already. The risk event that we have been trying to prevent by either the preventative controls or the detective controls has actually now materialized. What do we do to manage that risk? We're talking about damage control, essentially. We need to minimize the damage that happens and see what controls we need to be putting in place. And this is also looking at how do we prevent this from happening again in the future. You don't just deal with the incident and say, okay, we had a data breach and we reported it and now we're notifying customers of what happened. We need to then look at the control environment and say, what do we need to do better? Do we need some more technological patches, more access control, more training for staff so that they don't leave, I don't know, flash sticks and laptops and whatever else, other type of hardware lying around, much stronger password control requirements. Whatever the case may be, it's about looking back at your controls and saying, how can we strengthen things a lot more to prevent this from happening again? And that's what we're talking about when we're saying reactive controls. So as a compliance officer who's looking to design a strong control environment, you need to be thinking about it in this context. What are the preventative controls that need to be put in place? What are the detective controls that need to be placed? And what are the reactive things that we can do if this risk actually materializes? Think about the pandemic when you're talking about the reactive controls, for example. There was no way of having preventative controls in place. There was no way of having necessarily detective controls in a work environment, business environment context, but there was reactive controls that we could put in place. Staff had to start wearing masks when they entered the building, social distancing, and for a very long time, a lot of us were all working from home. And that was a reactive way to deal with a risk, a health risk that was being faced by employers and businesses. So reactive controls are not something that you can have in mind at the time, but sometimes you're just going to have to implement them in reaction, or have a process for implementing in reaction to a crisis, a risk event materializing. So again, it's not about saying I need to implement a preventative control or a detective control or a reactive control. You can have a combination depending on the risk that is being addressed and what is suitable for your specific business and for the specific level of risk that you are addressing. And remember, as you are designing controls, you do not want to hit an ant with a sledgehammer. In a massive multinational organization, it might make sense to have a humongous technologically advanced solution in place to manage a specific risk exposure. That might not be fit for purpose for a small startup that got their license yesterday and are still trying to figure out, the nature of their business. They might well be suited to have a manual, one-person transaction monitoring kind of situation because their volumes are small. So think about controls in the context of the environment, the business, the budget in terms of what is available to you to use and spend to manage those controls. Those are all the things that you need to be considering, and obviously making sure that the control mitigates the risk so that you are not finding yourself in a non-compliance situation. Let me give you an example just to further highlight and illustrate what I mean in terms of these types of controls. If as an institution, let's talk about a financial institution, you are onboarding clients and you want to make sure that you're able to identify high-risk customers. A preventative way of preventative control would be that in your KYC onboarding processes, you make sure that you are screening for, customers that are classified as high risk, so whether it's your sanctions people or your PEPs, there's a screening process that is incorporated into the onboarding process to make sure that those are highlighted, flagged, and identified. In terms of a detective kind of control that you would put in place, you would then say, okay, we've onboarded this person. Let's make sure that, if we're dealing with customers, maybe from high-risk jurisdictions, or where we have, we think that things might change, that you're updating the KYC. If there's a flag for need to update the KYC, maybe transactions are going to a person who, although not listed for maybe as a beneficial owner, lots of transactions are going to a PEP or a sanctions person. And that is something that you would pick up from your transaction monitoring, for example. So that would be a detective control that you put in place in your process when you're looking at your high-risk customers. And then a reactive control is your investigation and reporting of suspicious transactions that you do pick up over time that indicate to you that actually the customer activity is not what was indicated at the onboarding process, and is not aligned with that. So your transaction monitoring, your suspicious transaction reporting, and all of those things are working together to help you have a detective and reactive situation, and also reporting obviously to your regulator. So you might not have stopped your high-risk customer from being onboarded, but you at least have controls in place to be able to either detect them and react to them when you do then identify that that situation has occurred. Okay, I hope that this how-to video on designing strong controls, what you need to be thinking about in terms of preventing, reacting, detecting, and making sure that that all works in the context of the environment and the organization that you're working in, and that you have to collaborate with the business in designing these controls to make sure that it makes sense for the existing processes and they actually have the capacity to execute what you have in your mind on the ground. All of that is what comes together to design a strong control environment. And remember, a strong control environment is also a dynamic environment. It's not about we designed this control in 2009 and never looked at it again to see if it's still working, if the risks have changed, new risks have emerged. You always have to come back and look at your control environment and your controls and see if they are still fit for purpose and make adjustments and changes as needed to make sure that ultimately your control environment is still effective at risk management. Thank you so much for joining me in this how-to video. Please like the video, share it with someone who you think is going to benefit from learning more about the strong control environment. And if you want to go even deeper into controls and designing more controls and testing them and monitoring, sign up for the compliance practices workshop that I host on a regular basis. You can find all the information on the website. I will also include a link in the description of this video. The next one is actually taking place on the 27th of July, 2022. So that's at the end of this month. So be sure not to miss that workshop, and we're going to go a lot more deeper into control environment and all of that sort of thing, and how you monitor and test that environment. But last but not least, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. I appreciate your support. Make sure you subscribe so that you are the first to know when I upload more video. But until those future videos, which I know there are going to be some great ones coming up, excited to share that with you. Please have a good day and stay well. Bye.